Our speaker today is Maria Rast. She obtained her title of Master of Law, cum laude, from the University of Bern, Switzerland in 2014, and then went on to do a Master of Science, which she also cummed in sociology from VU Amsterdam in the Netherlands in 2017. Since 2018, she has been a PhD candidate at the Department of Sociology at VU Amsterdam. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. You can correct me now if I'm wrong. In the Netherlands. Her PhD research focuses on the challenges and opportunities of co-creative civil society initiatives and research projects that strive for refugees' social inclusion. The qualitative study with the co-creative elements is affiliated with the Refugee Academy of VU Amsterdam and the NWO VT research project called Engaged Scholarship and Narratives of Change with Prof. Gurashi. So without further ado, I'm going to leave it over to you. Welcome, and yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lorna, for introducing me, and thank you, Joe and Parvati, for inviting me to speak in today's webinar. Let me just share my screen. Let's see. I'm practicing with this. But of course, now it looks different than when I practiced.
First, you just have to do the presentation mode, and then after that, yes, display settings.
Yeah, it's not there anymore. So the settings were there, but yes, now it is. Perfect. Okay. Yes, okay, I think now it works. Yes, again, thank you for inviting me. As Lorna said, at the moment I am doing a PhD research on the challenges, opportunities, and conditions in time of co-creative refugee reception and integration. So the first part of this research is on civil society initiatives that aim to promote refugee societal inclusion in co-creation with people with a refugee background. And the second part is on academic research projects that aim to promote refugee societal inclusion by producing knowledge in co-creation with people with a refugee background. And this presentation today is going to be about the second part on the academic research projects, which is, as Lorna said, affiliated with an international research project called Engaged Scholarship and Narratives of Change, in which we connect engaged scholarship efforts on refugees in the Netherlands, US, and South Africa. And it is also connected to the Refugee Academy of VU Amsterdam, which is an infrastructure to connect academic knowledge with professional knowledge and experiential knowledge, so knowledge of people with a refugee background. So it's also a very co-creative academic initiative. So let me first tell you a bit more about the research problem or the theoretical assumptions behind this research project. So in the Netherlands, but actually everywhere in the discourse, refugees are often presented as a danger, like either a danger or victims in the dominant discourse. And not just the image of danger, but also the image of refugees as victims actually contributes to marginalizations of people with a refugee background in society. Because if they're presented as victims, they are presented as inferior others with deficits, as others that are in need of help. But not only they themselves, but also their knowledge is often considered subjugated, so as not legitimate sources and forms of knowledge. So their knowledge is included from dominant knowledge, actually. And because of that, dominant exclusive structures are reproduced and alternative narratives are marginalized. Or in other words, societal inclusion is almost impossible if the production of knowledge is not inclusive. And actually, researchers themselves are also affected by these invisible and subtle ways through which exclusion works. So they might be complicit in reproducing exclusive structures. So the question of this research was how to produce academic knowledge that can challenge dominant discourses on marginalized groups. And the assumption there then is that co-creation of knowledge might be a solution to produce more transformative knowledge that has the potential to challenge and unsettle dominant exclusive structures. And actually, because researchers write quite a lot about their co-creative projects and about the challenges they face, we know quite a lot about how researchers themselves reflect on power issues in research, but we know little about how co-creators with a refugee background reflect on, negotiate, and challenge power issues in co-creative research. So that was actually then the research question. I wanted to find more about the perspectives of people with a refugee background that participated as participants or knowledge co-creators in co-creative research. And then I would like to tell a bit more about this promise of co-creation, knowledge co-creation, and what I understand of how I understand co-creation. So first of all, I see co-creation as doing research with instead of about people with a refugee background. In a research project in which conventionally hierarchical research relations are deconstructed, a research that approaches participants as equal and knowledgeable experts and knowledge co-creators, or actually also solution co-creators. And by establishing a co-creative research, researchers can create a space that acknowledges and incorporates participants' alternative knowledges, skills, and ways of knowing. And by doing so, participants can gain more control over and ownership of the research process and the knowledge that is produced. So that is why the promise of co-creative, or actually of inclusive and reflective co-creative efforts, might help to surface participants' subjugated knowledges and way of knowing, and incorporate them in the production of knowledge, which might then nurture alternative understandings of why and how things are and how they could be. And knowledge co-creation then has transformative potential exactly because it addresses these visible and invisible hierarchical power relations that permeate knowledge production. So in other words, co-creative research bears the potential to create more inclusive knowledge, which might then contribute to the production of or to the creation of more inclusive solutions. But as I already I mentioned also in the beginning, there are multiple challenges of such inclusive and reflective knowledge co-creations. I already mentioned hierarchical societal relations and discourses about people with a refugee background. And because of these hierarchical societal relations, people are positioned differently in society. So their positionality might influence the way the research is done. And in fact, even if the research is co-creative, and even if researchers try to deconstruct relations or democratize the research process, they are still often the ones that design the research. They design who participates, what language is spoken. Researchers still have more resources. They are often the ones who get paid for the research, whereas participants are not, or only a bit. And researchers still are often the ones that set the agenda and interpret and analyze the data. Even if they do it together, they usually do it more extensively. And finally, in the writing, researchers are often the ones that write the academic output at least, but also other output. So as I said, researchers need to reflect on and unsettle these power relations during knowledge production. And as I also said, we know quite a lot about how they reflect on it, but in this research, I tried to find out more about how knowledge co-creators themselves reflect on and negotiate and challenge these power issues. And to do so, I conducted 13 interviews with people with a refugee background that had previously participated in co-creative research practices as participants or co-researchers. I did 3 workshop sessions with them of 2.5 hours in collaboration with a storyteller facilitator and a visual artist. The visual artist, by the way, also did the graphic design that I shared in the beginning, and I will share it again at the end of the presentation. Well, important to mention is that everything, all these interviews and workshop sessions, they took place online because of COVID-19. We started the project before COVID broke out, so everything was planned to do offline and to also include more arts-based research methods. But because we then had to switch to an online section or to online sessions, and also the storyteller facilitator who was actually in charge of the creative aspects also was not used to doing these workshops in an online setting. So all of this actually prevented us from doing it in the co-creative manner that we were planning to do. And so that's why I say the research itself had co-creative aspects. I wouldn't call it a co-creative research fully, because anyways, also, of course, I designed the research and the thought of the research questions. I don't think participants would have come up with exactly this research question. So it was my research, and I then approached the participants. And then also during the process, there were multiple power issues that challenged co-creation. For example, also that participants had limited time to participate. Also because COVID was quite new at that time and everybody was still struggling. And of course, this research was not their first priority. We all spoke different languages, and by this I also mean different professional languages, because people had also different professional backgrounds. So it was also difficult to check whether people actually understood each other and whether everyone's perspective was given equally space in the research. And this was especially difficult given the online environment. Because discussions went so fast, and it's just easier to feel whether everybody feels included and can share, and body language, all of that we missed, unfortunately. And then also because of that, the space was often hierarchical, exclusive, and I would say at times even unsafe. So we as a group struggled with many of the power issues that we were also researching. But I think it also contributed to the production of the knowledge we created, because we were also able to reflect on these issues. But still, in the end, we could not, and we still cannot, consider all our participants' wishes for the workshop and the potential future collaborations, because many of us wanted to go on and collaborate together also in the future, but everyone had different ideas how this collaboration should look like. So also in that sense, it was not fully co-creative, and yeah, there are many challenges in the research. But still, I think we found many nice findings. We reflected on a lot of issues together, and then I would like to share these reflections that participants shared with me in the during the interviews and the workshop sessions. Oh yeah, by the way, so we reflected on these challenges and opportunities of knowledge co-creation. But I also asked participants what they wanted. So in that sense, I tried to make the research more co-creative, because then they said that we could make a guide on how to co-create with newcomers, not just co-create knowledge, but also co-create policies, for example. So we shared our experiences and perspectives on knowledge co-creation, but in this guide on how to co-create, we tried to formulate it more openly, so that also policymakers could could have a look at those at this guide and would have something of it. So the first thing that participants said, or what was really important to participants, was that the research or the co-creation was inclusive, and by this they meant that the project should consider diversity in backgrounds, and especially include unheard perspectives. So people with a refugee background are usually always sort of approached as one group, whereas the group itself is actually really diverse, and participants stress that, and stress that also in research it was usually the same group of people with a refugee background that was heard. So since the what was called refugee crisis, since then it was often Syrians, it's often male people that speak English. So it's usually the same group of people. And actually, if you do field work in Amsterdam, for example, you ask to interview people with a refugee background, you usually interview someone who has been interviewed once or several times before. But then there are hundreds and thousands of others who never get heard. So people, participants were reflective about that. And then in addition to considering diversity in backgrounds, participants said that it was important to acknowledge multiple aspects of refugees' identities. So not just seeing them for their refuginess, but also acknowledging their other identities and experiences and talents that they have. And by doing so, unsettle normalized hierarchical differentiation. And they acknowledged that actually using arts-based methodologies in a critical and reflective manner contributed to that. I would like to share this quote of a participant who said, "I'm a good salsa dancer." So they asked me, "Can you give salsa lessons?" I said, "Yes. But when I take a closer look, I only learned salsa in a couple of months, I think. But I did philosophy, I did Sharia, I did Arabic languages. These I naturally did my whole life. Can I maybe do something with these, not salsa dancing?" But then I realized that people actually look at me like a lower person. When I have to do something scientific, they don't expect it from me. So participants acknowledged the importance of arts-based research methodologies, or actually methodologies like art-based ways to connect with each other, also outside of research. But they said that it was important not to then only acknowledge these artistic talents of participants, but also their intellectual talents. So arts-based methodologies are nice, but they should be adopted in this critical and reflective manner, and not as a way to reduce people with a refugee background, again, to only these artistic talents. And finally, participants said that it then was important also that when this diverse group of participants is included in the research, that also then they should not be expected to represent the whole diverse refugee community again. So also when the knowledge then is shared, it should be clear that this knowledge is not representative of the whole diverse refugee community. Then participants said that even if this diverse group is included in an inclusive way in the research, there is still a danger of tokenism, by which they meant that they were often included because people could then say, oh, look, I did this together with people with a refugee background, but that they were still not given space to actually make a difference in the research or in any co-creation for that matter. And in order for them to actually make a difference, participants identified two important aspects. The first one was that they said that the space needed to be safe. So people should trust each other and feel comfortable with each other to express themselves in the way they want. But then actually the space should be brave or safe enough for everyone to be brave enough to then unsettle control and ownership over the research process and content. So just feeling safe isn't enough, but people should be comfortable to then actually challenge each other and also challenge the researcher for participant to actually make a difference. I would like to share this quote of a participant who said, because the massive number of research on refugees created a negative impact or negative narrative about research itself. Oh, we have participated in so many research projects, but nothing changed. So that's in our research team. I try to bring this and I insist on it because I mean, we owe it to ourselves, I would say that, and other fellow researchers. If they want to research refugees in the future, to help them, and by building up a positive interaction or positive impression about academia among refugees. So this is actually a participant who participated in a research as a co-researcher, and who here tells this story that he tried to remind the research team again and again that they should live up to the promises they make, and that they should not just go into the field, extract knowledge, and never come back again, but that they should make sure that the research also changes something about the situation of people that participate in the research. And you see that in this example, this participant apparently feels safe enough to then be brave enough to remind the research team about this again and again, and to bring this in again and again. And finally, participants reflected on the impact the research made on their lives, and it did so on different levels, on a personal level, interpersonal level, and societal level. On a personal level, they said that the research improved their emotional state, especially also with co-creative methods. For example, they could forget their situation for a moment, and they could laugh with each other, and have a good time, connect with other people, and by doing so, they forgot their troubles for some time. And they said that also, especially these artistic methods were a way to promote, acknowledge, and embrace their various skills. Actually, to acknowledge these skills and not just approach them as I already said, as people with a refugee background, or approach them in their refuginess, in their identity as a refugee. On an interpersonal level, participants said that the research project was a way to establish relationships with others, to express themselves and get acknowledgement for their experiences, which they did not get in other spaces. And finally, they said by participating in the research and sharing their stories, they felt they could help other people with a refugee background. And what you see here on this personal level and interpersonal level, that this impact actually expands or is greater than the personal and interpersonal level, because it also challenges hierarchical relations. So people that are usually hierarchically different from each other and approach each other as others are able to approach each other in an equal way within a research project, or especially using arts-based methods. And if a research is done in this way, it actually also challenges exclusive discourses on people with a refugee background as victimized and voiceless others in research and society. So you could say, like, this impact on a personal and interpersonal level also shows that the research project in itself can be transformative, because the space in itself already is transformative. But then the research can still have impact on a societal level. So participants acknowledge that by participating in co-creative research, they could co-create and negotiate academic knowledge to a certain extent. And participants also said that the participating in the research helped them to better understand their societal positioning or their societal challenges. So whereas before the research, they probably thought that it was probably their own fault that they were struggling, and they thought it was due to themselves that they have troubles integrating or being included in society. By participating in the research and realizing that actually many others are facing the same struggles, and that it was actually due to societal structures that they felt this way, they understood their own positioning in a better way and got a better understanding of their own limitations or possibility within society. So you could say that participating in the research stimulated their sociological imagination. Then what I already mentioned a bit, but that they felt that participants, that they could, or they felt empowered to change their own and others people's situations. So I already said that they felt that by sharing their stories, they could help others participating in the research, but also by sharing their stories on a bigger level, on a societal level through the output of the research, they felt they could contribute to other people's situations. And finally, some participants actually considered their participation in the research as societal participation in itself. So whereas before they felt that their societal participation was limited, they felt that through the research, there was a space created for them to participate in society. And I would like to share one final quote of a participant who said that in the Netherlands, normally also in other countries, a refugee is a pitiful person. I was extremely against that image. I never felt a pitiful person. I went through a lot, but I always felt powerful. They wanted to hear stories from me that I only went through a lot. But then I began to tell different stories, exactly because of that insight. And then I started also to hear from my surroundings. Oh, what? Yes, and then I also saw how their image changed. So this participant shares that usually she was always asked to tell her story, and especially tell her story about her refugee experience, and people wanted to hear sad stories, and yeah, how she was struggling. But by participating in the research process, where she realized that there was this discourse on refugees as victims, and by this discourse, people are victimized and reduced to their refugee experience, but that actually people with the refugee background are powerful, and that by sharing powerful stories, stories of powerful experiences, she could challenge this discourse, tell different stories, and when she would tell these different stories, people would also start to see her in a different way. So she felt like by sharing these different stories, she could create reflection amongst other people of how they saw herself, but also refugees as a group. So these are the most important findings that we came up with in the research. And just as a conclusion, I would like to share a few reflections of myself also on the implications actually also of these findings, because I think these findings show very importantly that refugee co-creators are attentive and reflective knowledge co-creators. So they reflect on and in fact also negotiate power issues during knowledge production. And these findings illustrate that they are attentive and reflective. So they make well-considered decisions, for example, what kind of stories they share, or they advocate for more inclusive practices, as the example I shared from a refugee co-creator who pushed the research team again and again to make more impact in the field. Or also what I said, that participants pushed for including more diverse or unheard voices in the research. And by doing so, knowledge co-creators negotiate control and ownership over the research content and process. So by doing so, co-creative research can promote incorporation of refugees' perspectives and negotiation of knowledge. So actually, if co-creative research is adopted in this inclusive and reflective way, it might help to surface and incorporate participant subjugated knowledges and to challenge assumptions and to confront them with real life experiences of people with a refugee background. And this might then unsettle normalized exclusive structures, permeating both society and knowledge production. And as we have seen, academic engagement might enlarge participants or co-researchers' sociological imagination. So it might help to change participants' view on their own possibilities or impossibilities, their talents and their qualities, but also societal constraints. and it might empower them to use their voice to change their own and other people's situation by sharing their own or collective stories that can challenge taken for granted exclusive discourses. And in fact, our participants' profound awareness and their capacity to reflect on power issues in society and knowledge production definitely was actually also to a great extent inspired by their previous involvement in co-creative research. So we realized that by participating in a research project before our research project, participants became very aware of power issues, and they created this sociological imagination. So then this means actually that we have to be also careful with co-creative research, and that reflection is not only required by researchers that do the research, but also by people that participate in the research. So also knowledge co-creators need to be reflective and they need to be reflective about power issues, and especially about their own blind spots and how they might be socialized into dominant societal and academic discourses, especially due to their involvement in co-creative research. So they might be influenced by societal discourses and structures, but also through their participation in research. So that means if we actually want to fulfill the potential of co-creative research, we should approach it as a research in which everyone involved should aim to simultaneously unsettle and be unsettled. So these are some of the literature that inspired the research, and as I promised, I will share again this beautiful illustration of Parisa, who was the graphic designer who participated also in the workshop and co-designed it to a certain extent with me. Yes, that was my presentation. I think I will stop share the screen now, and I'll give the word to Lorna.
Thank you very much. That was a very insightful presentation. I see we've already gotten several questions, which has been answered every now and then. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that this work is from a PhD. So we will not be sharing the personal slides or from Maria, because as you know that this is still unpublished content, but the presentation will be available on the YouTube channel. I'm just reminding everybody to please just keep academic integrity in mind. If you want to look at it, then it's fine, you can look at it, but please keep in mind that this is her still unpublished thesis, but it will, I hope it will be published soon. Just one question from my side while Craig is making everybody else a panelist, so that we can all unmute and raise your hand and ask a question. I just want to say that you did mention in the reflective practices, in order for the refugees must have reflective practices as well as the researchers, in order for us to make a meaningful impact and to realize what that was. In South Africa, it is also very difficult to try and do that, to get into a community you have to go in there and make the expectations very, very clear of what will come out of it and what will not come out of it. For an example, if you go in and you tell a community that you would like to do research and what will come out of it is just one academic paper, which they will not be directly benefited from, but the story will be told or something like that, then they are sometimes more open to share with you. Whereas if you come in there and just take and leave them with nothing, then they are not open to share with the following person. But if you're very clear from the beginning and promise, like, because in South Africa also it depends on the university. Sometimes we can offer reciprocity, sometimes we cannot. It depends on the ethical guidelines. So we just have to be very, very sure about that. And then this is 100% not an advertisement, but I'm thinking for everybody on this page that might be interested, just go and have a look at the journal. It's called African Conflict and Peace Building Review. That journal publishes articles related to storytelling, to arts-based methods. You can even include sound clips and so on into some of the articles that you published. So for people, for example, if there was an interview with a nice insert or something that you would like to have said, then that journal might be of interest. Okay, let's see if we've got any other questions. So I answered that from Kuma, and then we've got an anonymous attendee that just says, thank you very much for an inspiring presentation. Anybody with raised hands? I cannot see any hands. Craig, you did allow everybody to do that, right?
Yes, I have, Lorna. I think it's just taking a while for some to filter through. So
okay, that's fine. Let's just see in the chat box if there's another question. Please repeat the journal name. Okay, so the journal is African Conflict and Peace Building Review. It is an accredited journal in South Africa, so I'm pretty sure that it is on a lot of other international universities' lists of accreditation. I'm saying it's not a punt for the journal. I just came across it and I thought it might be interesting regarding storytelling and arts-based methods. So if you would like to go and have a look at that. Okay, so if, no other questions there.
Maybe if there's no question yet, I can respond to what you said, Lorna, about the expectations of participants. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. First of all, I think in every context, there are specific challenges also. So I know also the PhD who was going into the field in South Africa also had approached challenges specific to the South African part. So for example, in the Netherlands, I was not I didn't have to answer questions or rarely had to answer questions why I wanted to do this research, whereas she's a Mexican PhD candidate that came from the Netherlands to South Africa. So there, of course, the extraction of knowledge was extra loaded. So I think we have to be very reflective also about specific challenges in specific fields. And then the other thing you said is also that we should discuss expectations, make them very clear from the very beginning on, and I think that is very true. And I think there also, as part of this research, I not only spoke to knowledge co-creators, but also scholars themselves. And one of these scholars also said that as academics, we sometimes also think that just participation in knowledge and writing academic output might not be of interest to our participants. But she said that actually she met many participants that were really interested to write together with her. So she then invited them also to write with her. So I think it's also nice for us. I know in our research project, we felt very or I think every researcher might sometimes doubt whether their research and participation in research is really of interest to our participants just in itself. And I think there we also have to be careful not to expect that our participants are not interested in intellectual exchanges. So yeah, these are things, but yeah, you're absolutely right about these expectations. I see Parvati has a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but just before I give you over to Parvati, she always has a lot of very insightful things to say, so it should be good. I just want to mention, so with us, what we do also to assist the participants, and sometimes the level, because also we have to make people feel comfortable all the time. So then we will design an infographic, for example, for school teachers that they can use within their classrooms. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an accredited publication to assist, but it can be something very, very meaningful, a booklet, a cover, like you mentioned, just some form of something that can influence policy decision making or so on. Yeah, that was actually it, but I see Parvati has left. So before she comes back, I just want to mention, yeah, so people, please don't overlook the importance of something that that we see as non-scientific publications. If it's in a local school journal, for example, if it's for educators, or if it's in the local government gazette or anything like that, the people really do feel yeah, part of the research process, and they really do appreciate that. Okay, while we wait for Parvati to come back, and I promise as soon as she's back, I will let her answer her question or ask her question. But for now, there's a question in the chat that says, okay, wait, Parvati, you can go first, and then we'll answer the chat question.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. First of all, huge thanks for a fantastic presentation. That was really kind of insightful, and I loved the honesty. I think we hear too much about some checklists of things that one ought to do, but very little of actually the difficulties, but also what do people actually think about these kinds of co-production and so on. So co-production is always written from a very singular perspective, which is academic, with no right to response of those who have co-produced with them. And I found that work relatively shallow sometimes. So I think this is a wonderful practical initiative which shows, what does this co-production involve? But of course, this also raises a question of authorship, right? So how, especially when you're doing a thesis, how do you kind of share authorship for these kinds of insights, or with the people who have generated this insight? And I realized that there's no really simple answer, but I just wondered if you had any reflections. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Parvati. Yeah, I would have loved to write together with participants, but as Lauren also said, so yeah, this is my PhD research, and yeah, it is often difficult then, of course, with all these with the different requirements. You need to publish and in a certain amount of time, and of course, co-production or co-creation entails sharing this power. And if you take that serious, it also means that you enter a really long process. So I decided not to write scientific outputs together with participants, but I want to give them the option to be mentioned by name. So by this, I mean, I want to give them the option. So if they feel that this could harm them in any way, they don't have to do it. But in that way, I aim to sort of acknowledge them as co-producers of knowledge by adding the name in the quotes that I included in the paper. So that is one way to sort of acknowledge their authorship or contribution to the production of knowledge. And the other way is that we were creating this guide on how to co-create with newcomers, and there the authorship is shared, and the guide is not published yet, which is due to this reason that we are not yeah, we are not, we don't agree yet about whether it is finished or not, and we still are in the process of publishing it. So yeah, that's the answer I can give. So we have the scientific output. I decided not to co-produce, but to allow them to be mentioned by name. And the other output we co-produce, which then also means that I will not just publish the results yet, because not everybody agrees on whether the guide is finished or not.
Okay, thank you for that. Kieran, I see that your hand is up, but let's just quickly take this question from Biba on the Q&A. It says the knowledge exclusions that refugees suffer, in quotation marks, how much of that is because they are refugees, close quote, and how much is a result of their origins as citizens of the marginalized global south? Would refugees from Switzerland have suffered the same exclusions? If you've got any ideas on that.
Well, I think at the moment, with people coming in from Ukraine to the Netherlands and the rest of Europe, I think we see that they are treated very differently. They are welcomed differently than people coming from other contexts. So I think it is a combination of their refugee state and them coming from south or from other parts that is not the West. So yeah, I think you're definitely right. There part of it is due to their refugee-ness, and the other part is due to the global location where they come from. Because yeah, I think with the people from the Ukraine, it showed very well the differences between how people are welcomed, about the images we have about them, and also the rights that come with it. Because I don't know about all the contexts, but in the Netherlands, people from Ukraine, they are allowed to start working right from the beginning on of their arrival, whereas people from other contexts, they have to go through the asylum procedure, which also means that they are not allowed to work from the beginning on, for example. So yeah, you see that this image and the way we approach people is very much connected automatically to the status they get in the new country, and then the rights they have and the obligations they have. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that answer. Yeah, it is sad, but it is true. I'm just aware of time, and that we mentioned we'll stick to 1 hour. So there's 3 more questions. I'm going to give Guma, you are allowed to talk and present your question. Then I'm going to just quickly go to the chat question in the Q&A, and then Parvati, you can have the last question. So Mr. T. Guma, will you or Miss T. Guma, I'm sorry, will you just unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Maria, for that really good presentation. I just had a couple. Maybe I missed it because I joined later. But could you tell us a bit more about the people that you spoke to, the refugees, whether you had any in terms of the group of people that you spoke to, how you recruited, whether there was any challenges for you, and also you mentioned very a lot about the positive and impacts. I mean, were there any talk in your interviews about negative? I mean, because we know that doing co-creative research is quite challenging for both parties, in terms of not only recruitment, but also the whole process, understanding what is research, where are the expectations, the outcome, I mean, there's so much to talk there. So did any of these challenges also come up in your research as well as the positive input?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. So in terms of recruitment, I already said that I also spoke to scholars that did, or some of them did co-creative research. So I then asked them to connect me to people that participated in the research. So yeah, I tried to turn it around and approach participants directly, not through scholars, but that was really difficult because, of course, yeah, it is anonymous who participated in research. So yeah, I asked around in my network, but usually, yeah, I only got the name of the scholar, but not participants. Yeah, that's one thing. And then, yeah, their background was quite mixed. So there were some people that came from Syria, for example, just a few years ago. And there were also some participants that came in the 90s from Iran. I had females and males. Also, one person that identifies as non-binary. So it was a really mixed group. There was also one participant who came as undocumented and then in the process got documentation. So yeah, it was really diverse, which sort of means that it was inclusive in a certain way. But I have to say, because all of them already participated in a co-creative research project, it means that they did not belong to the most marginalized groups, because they somehow were connected to academia, and some of them worked as co-researchers in academia. So this actually also brings me to the next question you have on the challenges they were reflecting on. And in fact, sort of the conditions I mentioned during the presentations also were developed through the challenges they set. So when I said that the conditions was that they needed to feel safe, or that they needed to be able to make a difference, it means that some of them said that in certain projects or spaces they did not feel included, or they did not feel safe, or they did not feel like they had the power to actually make a difference. And also, for example, these reflections on what makes the group inclusive also came from actually critique of participants who said that some of the projects were not inclusive and were excluding people that are already usually excluded from participations, and that was also one of the struggle we then had in our research project, because one of the participants really would have loved us to include people that were more marginalized and never participated in academic projects. And this brought me to the struggle that, of course, I have this research project on experiences of participation in co-creative research. So I did not find a way how to include then people who did not participate in these projects, and to how to how to do research on their experiences of co-creation when they did never participate in co-creation. So these were challenges that participants mentioned, but also challenges that we ourselves struggled in our project. Thank you. I hope this answers it for now sufficiently.
I think that can be in your section for including for future research purposes. And then we've got, sorry, just a correction. It's Tominke that's going to ask a question after this. I don't know why her name appears as Parvati, but I think Parvati already asked and was sorted. So this question here is just, thanks for the insightful presentation. I'm just wondering if you came across the issue of visual production. For instance, photos, videos of refugees and participants are taken and shared. as one component of your research outputs during the workshop or interviews with your participants? Given the emerging trend of visualizing thesis research, do they have any concerns about it, or how do we as researchers approach this matter? I think this has got ethical implications for each institution where perhaps you are doing your research. So if you can just share your experiences.
Yes. So in this research, we did not, or in this specific project, we did not take pictures. I mean, the online sessions were recorded, but they are not published. I have to say that maybe this is part also of what we're struggling with in our guide that we want to publish, how to co-create with newcomers, that we would like to make it a bit more lively, to include maybe also quotes from participants, but then actual excerpts of the recordings that we have. So then in that case, then we would of course come across this issue. And then I think most of my participants, they would feel they don't feel that vulnerable, because as I already said, they already participated in academic projects, so they themselves would, I think, not have a problem with it. But our institution would have a problem with it. So we would probably have to go through ethical procedures to get that done. But for now, we don't have this publication of photographs, but the illustrations that I shared of Parisa, these are actually portraits also of participants. And yeah, so these we could share. The participants would definitely feel okay with that. And then I just can mention that, yeah, I already said that this research is part of a bigger research project, and there we have people that work with also more photos of families, for example, and there some people were then censorized, I think, or that the pictures were taken in a way that people are not identified right away. And there are other artistic projects where also actually artists with an LGBTQI identity participated. And I think many of them can be considered quite vulnerable, but because they are artists, they also are okay with sharing images of themselves. They actually do that also in their own social media and other channels through which they share their art. So yeah, these are a few things that I can share about this. So yeah, these are these two sides. Like the one side is, what about participants? How do they feel about it? What do they do? And the other side is, what does our institution say about it? And what are the possibilities there? So actually, our institution is still developing guidelines on ethics on visual material. So for now, there are some loopholes, but I can imagine that in the futures, yeah, it's not possible to go through these loopholes because it will be regulated in the future. But by the way, if you wish to connect about this, because we are also thinking about this, we are struggling about this, so it might be interesting to connect, and we could have a session on it sometime in the future, because we are also struggling to develop ethically responsible practices on that.
That actually does sound like, I think a lot of people might be interested in that, because I think we are all, if we want to do arts-based methods, looking for things like that and what we need. Tominke, would you like to share? I cannot see you, but I suppose then you are regarded as Parvati. Are you there? Okay. I can see Pavati's name appear twice, but I think that one of them might be you. But at the moment, I can't see any questions. Let me just quickly see what's in there. Oh, she used the sign-in link. That's why. Okay, but yeah, she's. I think. So sometimes she struggles with internet connectivity. Taminke, can if you can hear me, would you like to ask your question? Okay, in the absence of that, I would just like to say thank you very much for your very insightful presentation. We do wish you all the best luck with your future endeavors and with your writing up of your thesis. May it really do go well. I think we might talk as deeper, which is the decolonial education for peace in Africa, as some of our ethical boundaries and so on about producing creative images or creative sounds or anything arts-based method approach. So if we ever do that, then we will make that matter clear on our website. So everybody, you can please go to our website, see what's coming up, what presentations are we doing next. But for now, I would just like to thank everybody so very much for attending this one. And thank you very much, Maria, for your valuable conclusions and your valuable contributions that you've made. This work is really important, and yeah, we do thank you.
Thanks so much. And yeah, please do not hesitate to connect in the future. It will be really interesting to continue the conversation.